Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa was not born into nobility. Unlike most of the names that echo through the halls of Roman history, he did not come from a patrician family or a lineage of consular ancestors. He was a plebeian of modest origin, the son of an ordinary citizen from the Vipsania gens, likely born in the small town of Arpinum. Yet it was precisely this humble background that made his rise all the more extraordinary. While others ascended through bloodlines, Agrippa carved his path through merit. And what drove him was not blind ambition, but a rare blend of competence, loyalty, and political intelligence. His youth intertwined with that of Gaius Octavius, the future Emperor Augustus. It's unclear exactly when their friendship began, perhaps during military campaigns, perhaps during their studies under the philosopher Apollonius of Rhodes. But what is certain is that this bond would change the course of history. Octavian was the great-nephew and adopted heir of Julius Caesar, a position that placed him at the center of the political storm following the dictator's assassination. And while many around him hesitated or betrayed, Agrippa remained. Steadfast, reliable, always present. Not as a flatterer, but as an equal in moral strength. From the earliest moments of the post-Caesar turbulence, Octavian understood that he could not survive alone. And it was Agrippa in whom he placed his trust. Still very young, Agrippa began to take part in strategic meetings, political decisions, and most of all, in battle. He was not merely a childhood friend. He became Octavian's shield, his sword, and in many moments his mind. In a world where alliances collapsed at the first sign of advantage, their relationship stood firm, built on mutual respect and complementarity. Octavian had the name, the charisma, the legacy. Agrippa brought the action, the method, and the relentless execution. It is at this point that Agrippa's story ceases to be merely a tale of friendship and becomes a vital cog in the machinery that would drive the Roman Empire forward. His rise is a reminder that even in a world ruled by noble bloodlines, talent, when joined with loyalty, could shape history. And Agrippa's history was only just beginning. Before we dive into the next topic, just take a second to make sure you're subscribed to the channel. It really helps the content reach more people. And there's a lot of amazing history coming your way that you won't want to miss. When Rome plunged into chaos after the assassination of Julius Caesar, it was Agrippa who became the sharp blade wielded by Octavian. At just 20 years old, he was already proving his brilliant military mind by leading troops against the allies of Mark Antony, at a time when Caesar's young heir could barely secure his political footing. While others got lost in speeches and fragile alliances, Agrippa acted and won. His first major test came at the Battle of Medina, but the moment his name was truly etched into history was during the war against Sextus Pompey. Sextus, the son of the legendary Pompey the Great, controlled the maritime routes of the Mediterranean, choking Rome with naval blockades and attacks. He posed a direct threat to the capital's survival. At that time, the Roman military was primarily a land force, but Agrippa grasped what few others understood. Whoever controls the sea controls the empire. With remarkable foresight, he reorganized Octavian's navy, trained new soldiers, and introduced technological innovations, such as the use of the corvus, a boarding device that allowed hand-to-hand combat even at sea. The victory at Naulochus against Pompey was more than a military triumph. It was a decisive turning point that allowed Octavian to breathe and solidify his power. Yet Agrippa's military peak was still to come. In 31 BC, at the Battle of Actium, it was once again Agrippa who led the fleet that defeated Mark Antony and Cleopatra. He didn't just win. He isolated the enemy, cut off their supplies, mastered the tides, harnessed the wind, and orchestrated the fleet like a true maestro of war. While the world watched Octavian, it was Agrippa who truly commanded the final strategy. With that victory, Rome was finally transformed into an empire, and Octavian would be crowned Augustus. But between the lines of glory, it was the plebeian who had never sought recognition, only the right victory, who had secured Rome's future. Agrippa was not merely a general. He was the silent wall standing between Rome and collapse. Agrippa's sword had secured peace. But with peace came a new mission, to transform Rome not just into the capital of an empire, but into a physical reflection of the greatness he and Augustus had built with blood. It was in this moment that Agrippa traded his armor for a compass, war tactics for urban planning. If he had once saved Rome with victories, now he would shape its eternity with stone, marble, and water. For nearly 2 decades, Agrippa devoted himself to reinventing the city. And he did so with a rare sense of responsibility. He didn't build monuments for himself, but for the people. He personally oversaw the construction of 2 new aqueducts, Aqua Julia and Aqua Virgo, ensuring a constant supply of clean water for an increasingly urban and growing population. With this infrastructure, he not only prevented disease, but also paved the way for something unprecedented: public baths. The baths of Agrippa were Rome's first great bathhouses, not just places for hygiene, but for community, culture, and belonging. For the first time, plebeians and patricians shared the same space to cleanse their bodies and renew their spirits. And this was possible because Agrippa understood that a city must serve its citizens, not just its elites. But his most symbolic creation was still to come: the Pantheon. Although the current version was rebuilt later, it was Agrippa who erected the original structure, a temple dedicated to all the gods, a synthesis of unity, diversity, and spiritual power. In it, Rome was not merely stone. It was an idea, a divine presence. And on the inscription of its facade, the name is not Augustus, nor Caesar, nor any god. It is Agrippa's. Engraved not as an emperor, but as someone who built with heart. While others sought glory in the palaces, Agrippa carved his into the streets. The Rome we know today was born from the sweat of an invisible builder who chose to serve rather than shine. It's impossible to walk through the streets of Rome, or even imagine how those streets once were, without stepping on the marks left by Agrippa. His constructions were not merely functional works. They were visible declarations of a new era, a time when the city was meant to reflect the grandeur of the empire, but also the comfort of its people. He understood that a strong empire was upheld not only by the cement of its walls, but by the dignity of its citizens. The baths, for example, ceased to be a luxury reserved for the elite. With the baths of Agrippa, inaugurated in 25 BC, public bathing became accessible to ordinary people. And more than that, it was an architectural spectacle. Clad in marble, adorned with gardens, statues, fountains, and advanced hydraulic systems, these baths became a model replicated for centuries across the Roman world. Agrippa offered Rome a new way of living, where leisure and hygiene became symbols of civilization. The water supply system Agrippa built was so well designed that many of the aqueducts continued to function for centuries. He mapped the city's topography, designed elevation profiles, identified clean water sources, and brought Roman engineering to an almost mystical level. And most impressively, he oversaw everything personally, visiting work sites, inspecting construction, and listening to the workers. He wasn't a distant politician, but a hands-on administrator with his feet on the ground and his hands dusted in stone powder. But perhaps no work is more symbolic than the Pantheon. The inscription still visible on its facade, Marcus Agrippa, son of Lucius, consul for the 3rd time, built this, has survived empires, earthquakes, invasions, and renaissances. The temple, with its revolutionary dome and geometric harmony, stands as one of humanity's greatest architectural legacies. And even though the current version was rebuilt by Hadrian, the name that remains at the entrance is Agrippa's, like an eternal whisper. The city of Rome was not merely conquered. It was shaped, sculpted, irrigated, and humanized. And at the heart of it all, without golden statues or fiery speeches, stood the man behind it, the architect of eternity. If there was ever someone who could have been emperor and declined the throne with dignity, that person was Agrippa. Unlike many who conspired, murdered, or betrayed in pursuit of the crown, he held real power in his hands, the respect of the army, the trust of the people, and complete influence over Augustus. And yet he chose not to use it for himself. His loyalty was not a disguise, it was conviction. And that is why his story is more powerful than that of many who actually ruled. When he married Julia, the daughter of Augustus, Agrippa was elevated not only into the imperial family, but into the very center of the succession. His sons, Gaius Caesar and Lucius Caesar, were adopted by Augustus as direct heirs. That made Agrippa, in practice, the father of the next generation of Caesars. No other figure in Rome held such power and proximity to the throne. And yet, he never attempted to go beyond what was entrusted to him. There was never a coup, a threat, blackmail, or manipulation. Only quiet service. Augustus, a man famously wary of others, trusted Agrippa like no one else. When he fell seriously ill, he even considered handing over the succession directly to Agrippa. And even then, Agrippa remained a counselor, not a claimant. His commitment was to the stability of Rome, not to personal glory. While other generals used their victories to present themselves as messianic figures, Agrippa used his fame to legitimize Augustus' rule. He served as the executor of reforms, the stabilizer of the provinces, the architect of social order. He was the invisible gear that kept the imperial machine running smoothly. And that conscious refusal to seek the spotlight turned Agrippa into a moral legend. He proved that true power lies not in ruling, but in supporting, and that the greatness of a man is sometimes measured by his ability to say no to personal glory in the name of a greater good. The death of Agrippa in 12 BC was not merely the end of a life. It marked the beginning of a void that Rome would never truly fill. He passed away at the age of 51, after decades of serving both the Republic and the Empire with a dedication that bordered on the superhuman. For Augustus, it was a devastating personal loss. According to Cassius Dio, the emperor once said he could not have governed Rome without Agrippa by his side. It was no exaggeration. Agrippa was not just an advisor. He was his wall, his compass, his balance between power and the people. The loss was so profound that Augustus ordered Agrippa to be buried with full state honors in the mausoleum of the imperial family, an exceedingly rare distinction, granted only to the most trusted and loyal. No other plebeian ever reached such a level of trust. And yet, as history so often does, his name was gradually covered in dust. Agrippa, the architect of the victory at Actium, the visionary behind the public baths, the father of imperial heirs, the man who turned Rome into living stone, was slowly forgotten. While tyrannical emperors like Caligula and Nero were immortalized for their madness, Agrippa faded into silence. Perhaps because he didn't write his own history with arrogance. Perhaps because he built so much for others and so little for himself. His humility condemned him to historical invisibility. Yet in the structures that still sustain Rome today, in the aqueducts, in the layout of the streets, in the name etched on the Pantheon's facade, his legacy endures as a silent memory. Pliny the Elder, one of the few who recognized his true worth, wrote, "Agrippa built more for the good of Rome than any other man, and he did it in the spirit of service, not personal glory." And that is why his story must be told, not as a footnote, but as a monument built in words. Because while many men conquer through power, only the greatest build through love. If you've made it this far, it's because this story touched you too. And the truth is, Rome is full of characters like Agrippa, men and women who changed the world, yet remain almost unknown. If you want to keep uncovering these hidden stories with us, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. That way, you won't miss any of our upcoming videos. And don't forget to leave a like. It tells YouTube that this content is worth sharing with more people who truly love history. Rome still has so much to reveal, and you'll be with us on that journey.